Well, it looks like you survived. That's good. It wouldn't do to have you die now. Huh? Who are you? Donnie? Why is there two of the boss now?
I am not quite sure, Gabrielle, but something surely is amiss.
Interesting how only we know we look so different from each other, isn't it, other me? A little, but I'm not sure who you are. What's your deal? Why are you here? Questions, questions, questions. I'll tell you what. Meet me at the center of the Big Empty after you have suitably prepared yourself, and I'll tell you everything you need to know. It's a massive crater where the vault used to be. You can't miss it. That seems a bit inconvenient. Why not just tell me now? Well, if I made it easy for you, they wouldn't call us loony now, would they? See you there. What in the... What just happened? Well, I think a fragment of my personality split off somehow and is causing me some trouble. At least that's what I think is going on.
This certainly seems like quite the predicament.
Has this happened to you before, boss? Oh, hi Gabby. Hi Donnie. Nope, this is the first time, but it's kind of fun, right? That ain't how I'd put it, no. Well, there's no use in making her wait. Let's get right on into it. Good evening, darlings and deviants. My name is Lucy, and I'm just a little loony. At the behest of my duplicitous duplicate, I need to prepare to face the dangers of the desert. And what's the best way to prepare for any situation? Drawing cards! Having more cards in hand means I'll be able to best any beast that barrages my personal barrier. And of course, I'm a little loony, so we're going to be showing off card draw options in every color, and colorless. And some cool multicolored cards that I think are cool to draw cards with too. Without further ado, let's start the show. White for years was known as the underdog in terms of card draw, at least in Commander. After all, in a format that wants you to play the biggest, goofiest cards and strategies imaginable, a few cards that let you look for 2-drops isn't really gonna cut it, is it? But in recent years, White's gotten really good at doing this whole drawing extra cards thing. One of my favorite options is Master of Ceremonies. For 3 and a white, you get a 3/4 Rhino Druid that lets everyone choose between friends, money, or secrets during your upkeep. Each person who votes for friends gets a 1/1 citizen token, each person who votes money gets a treasure token, and each person who votes secrets gets to draw a card. So generous, until you remember that you get all of whatever your opponents choose. Normally you'll be drawing at least 1 card with this and making a few blockers, but sometimes you'll be drawing up to 3 cards or ramping a ton. You'll be the life of the party with this MC at your back. But card draw isn't always just for fun. We also have to archive how we're going to achieve victory. To that end, we have Archivist of Ogma. Get it? For 1 and a white, you get a 2/2 Halfling Cleric with Flash that gives us a card and a life for every time our opponents search their libraries. Come on, boss. People don't really search their libraries that much. How many cards can this realistically draw you? You'd be surprised, Gabby. There's over 700 different cards in this game that search for different cards from the library. Now, not all of these are all-stars, but considering this list includes the likes of all of the fetch lands and most green ramp spells, you start to realize this little guy could draw you a ton of cards at the right table. White's card draw can feel a little weak sometimes, especially compared to the other colors in this game, but don't discount its strength. White can keep up with the best of them nowadays, you just have to pick the right tool for your deck. Blue's up next, and honestly I could just say the entire color here if you want to draw cards. This color draws cards in its sleep. I'm pretty sure a blue player would rather lose the game than decline a card draw. I think it's a medical condition at this point.
It is quite true. This dastardly ailment is called Mindseeker-itis, named after the favorite planeswalker of the young lad first inflicted with the disease.
Huh. Well, you learn something new every day, I guess. I do still want to mention some of my favorites, though. First off, we have Ghostly Pilferer. For 1 and a blue, you get a 2/1 Spirit Rogue that lets you discard a card to make it unblockable. And why would you want to do that? Well, when it becomes untapped, you can pay 2 to draw a card. Probably a good idea to make it unblockable before you attack to get that untap effect, unless you have some other shenanigans to tap it down. That's not all though. It also gets a passive effect to draw you a card whenever any opponent casts a spell from anywhere besides their hand. Get a Cascade spell? That's a card. Casting from Exile? That's a card. Basically all of the things I talked about in the video with Kellen the Kid? That's a card. Heck, even anyone casting their commander gets you a card. And on top of that, they mostly have an unblockable spirit making their way into their bases. This card does a lot of work, and it's surprising how little of it I see out in the wild. The next one's a little expensive, but it's worth every mana. It's Shimmer Dragon. For 4 and 2 blue, you get a 5/6 dragon with flying, and as long as you control 4 or more artifacts, it has hexproof. That's a pretty okay card on its own. I'd play that in a limited deck, but we can also tap 2 of our artifacts and draw a card. This card is amazing in any artifact deck, really, especially since a lot of them don't really tap on their own. You have a few equipment sitting around, tap them to draw a card. You have some random artifacts that give you some passive bonuses, tap them to draw a card. Are you more evil than the entire spawn of evil lineage? Tap artifacts like Winter Orb and Trinisphere that hinder your opponents, and before it comes to your turn, or when you need to cast a cheap spell, tap them with the Shimmer Dragon so you don't have to incur those downsides. Is it mean? Yeah, but if you're playing these cards, you know you're not winning any popularity contests. Well, you were playing blue. You knew you weren't that popular anyway. Personally, I love playing Shimmer Dragon alongside my attractions. They're artifacts, meaning that if I've opened up a bunch of them, then I get to tap them down to draw cards. So much usefulness in one very large package. Like I said, blue has plenty more options than these to draw cards, but it's not always fun to just jam Rhystic Study in every deck you can. Explore the options you have and be creative. Black loves to draw cards almost as much as blue does, but it's gonna make you pay for it. Big time. But power is worth any price. Until it kills you. But hey, it was worth it. Full send, am I right? Anyway, here are some of my favorites. Fun fact. Greed isn't just a picture people post under Wizards tweets whenever they want to be 100% totally original like everyone else. Seriously guys, I get the sentiment, but get better material. Treacherous and Traitorous Greed are right there. Spice it up a bit. It's also a pretty solid card draw spell. It's a bit expensive at 3 and a black for an enchantment that you then have to pay a black and 2 life in order to draw a card, but after that, each time you draw a card, you're basically getting a better and better deal. You definitely need a way to offset that life loss, but black has more than enough tools to help you out on that front. Like this one. Dread Presence is a fantastic card draw engine that basically has to be answered instantly. For 3 and a black, you get a 3/3 Nightmare that lets you, whenever you play a swamp, to either draw a card and lose 2 life, or deal 2 damage to any target and gain 2 life. This combos with anything that gets extra lands onto the battlefield, from Wayfarer's Bauble to any of those green ramp spells you might be playing. Getting an extra card for every land you play isn't too bad either. Psst. You want this to be super awesome? Put an Urborg into play and then play any of the fetch lands. You'll thank me later. Black's card draw may hurt, but it certainly gets results. How big of a price are you willing to pay for power? Well, one thing you don't need to pay for is subscribing. It lets you know when I get a new video out, and it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. I am definitely still working on something for hitting 500 subscribers. Things have just been kind of, explodey lately. So red is a bit interesting. Because it's the best color, because it's exciting, because through the power of emotion and compassion I can finally feel something in my cold, angelic heart. No? Are you okay, Gabby? Being okay is subjective. Duly noted. Red is interesting because it has some amazing options for card draw, but not quite in the way you think. Here, let me explain with some examples. First up is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. For 2 and a red, you get a legendary artifact that lets you take as many cards as you want from your hand and discard them. Then you can draw that many cards, plus 1 extra for your troubles. Then if you've descended during your end step, meaning a permanent card was put into your graveyard somehow, you put a boar counter on it. Then, once you've got 3 of them, you can flip Grinder into Tekchulan, the Searing Rift. It's a land, hey look, mono red ramp, that you can tap for a red that lets you discover X whenever you cast a permanent spell with the Rift, where X is the mana value equal to the spell you're casting. It's a lot of value wrapped up in this card, but it's not exactly card draw per se. Here's another one. Reforge the Soul is 3 and 2 red for a sorcery that forces everyone in the game to discard their hand and draw 7 cards. It also has the Miracle keyword, meaning if it's the first card you draw for a turn, you can cast it for 1 and a red, even if it's on your opponent's turn. If you don't have that many cards in hand, this can be great. But it could be hard to time this effectively. If you draw it as a top deck, you need a couple extra answers, but you want to keep the cards in your hand, it's not that great. And that's kind of the same thing that you get about Oliver Red's card draw. You have to get into a situation where you benefit from this whole discarding your hand thing, but when you do, Red can do some extremely powerful things. Now I do want to talk about the whole thing that Red has that's called Impulse Draw. So Impulse Draw is basically when a card tells you to exile the top X cards of your deck, and you can play those until either the end of this turn or until the end of your next turn. Technically, this is card draw because you're getting access to new cards, but it's temporary. It's not like pure card draw where it stays in your hand and you can hold answers, and a lot of these typically reveal an exile face up, so your opponents will know what's going on ahead of time. It's It's not exactly draw, but it counts. Like, if you need to put extra card draw in your deck and you're playing mono red, don't be afraid to put some impulse draw in there. It will get you extra cards and more options. Just, think about it before you, just throw it into a deck, Now we're at green, and honestly, green's pretty close to blue in terms of how easy it is to draw cards. The only difference is that green actually touches grass from time to time, meaning it kind of relies on creatures for a lot of its draw. Let me show you what I mean. Here we have Garruk's Uprising. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment that gives all of your creatures trample. In addition, when it comes into play, it draws you a card as long as you have a creature with power 4 or greater. Not only that, but if something with power 4 or greater comes into play after the enchantment hits, you draw another card. Will you always have creatures with power 4 or greater in your green decks? Not really. This card isn't phenomenal in a token-based green deck, for instance. However, if you are playing with beefy creatures, be sure to make friends with Garruk. Up the Beanstalk is kind of a big example of how green likes to draw cards. It's another enchantment for 1 and a green that draws you a card when it comes into play, but it also draws you a card whenever you cast a spell with mana value of 5 or greater. As long as you're putting a bunch of your green mana into Big Dumb Idiots, you'll be keeping your card supply well stocked. Just don't mess with the giants up there, I hear they can get a little testy. When you're looking to draw cards, you really shouldn't forget about the colorless options. Every deck can run these, so if you feel like the other card draw options in your colors don't quite fit your game plan, be sure to give these a shot. Zenith Chronicler is 2 generic mana for a 3/1 Phyrexian Construct artifact creature that says, whenever a player casts their first multicolored spell a turn, each other player draws a card. Now, if you're playing a multicolored deck, maybe give this one a pass. But if you're playing a colorless deck or a monocolored deck, this card is a powerhouse. Just be careful because you are drawing your opponent's cards as well. Be sure to leverage that when they go to swing at you. After all, biting the hand that feeds should have consequences. Make sure you have some at the ready. Now, this one isn't exactly a card draw specific card, but it does draw you a card. Sometimes. And it's an Infinity card, so I'm legally required to mention it. It's Strength Testing Hammer. For 1 generic mana, you get an equipment that equips for 3 generic mana. When the equipped creature attacks, you roll a 6-sided die. The creature gets +X+0, where X is the result until end of turn. Then, if it's the biggest creature out there, or tied for the biggest, you get to draw a card. If you like rolling the dice and proving your creatures are the strongest around, give this hammer a swing. Colorless cards are extremely versatile, and their card draw options reflect that. Be sure to figure out what your deck is looking for, and include the card draw that's right for you. Finally, let's not forget that multicolored cards are powerful for a reason. You gotta spend multiple colors on them, so let's go over a couple of my favorite ones. Whirlwind of Thought is 1 a white, a blue, and a red for an enchantment that simply reads, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. While it seems simple at first glance, and it kind of is, it's a bit stronger than it lets on. It goes infinite with a ham sandwich, it works with instants, sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers too. Ooh, and it works with battles! And if you're in a deck that cares about any of those card types, it'll pay back that mana investment very quickly. Another super cool multicolored card draw machine is Deathreap Ritual. For 2, a black and a green, you get an enchantment that draws you a card at your end step if a creature died this turn. Pretty easy to do, if a bit underwhelming, but that's why I lied. It actually works on every end step, meaning if your opponents kill any creatures, yours, your opponents, sacrificing their own creatures, all of that, then you're getting to draw a card. This card can pretty easily draw you 4 cards every rotation of the table, and the longer it sticks around, the more value you can accrue. Card draw is honestly one of the most important things to include in your commander decks. After all, if you run out of options and your opponents haven't, you'll be stuck more than... Cassie, a little help here? Stuck more in a prairie dog and molasses on a hot summer day? Oh, that's perfect! I haven't really been really good at the westernisms, Well, reckon you're gonna need all them there cards. We're gonna need all the help we can get if we're gonna get you to the big empty. Oh, right, the other me. Wait, Weir? She only wants to see me. You don't need to. I'll hush now. I ain't gonna sit around here and let some hussy strut around looking like you. Don't y'all worry none, miss. I ain't gonna let nobody hurt you.
Nor shall we. We shall protect you with our very lives.
Don't worry. We've got your back, boss. Aw, thanks, everyone. All right, let's do it to it. As always, my lovely audience, thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, au revoir!